name is Amber Haynes. I am one of the adjustment counselors at the high school. This is Nicole Giselle. She is the other adjustment counselor, and we are just very excited to have this program. It came out of the NAMI program that we sponsored last year, and we decided to take this initiative. And so we want you guys to come to guidance too here at the high school. So your guidance counselor, your teens guidance counselor, Nicole works specifically with the seniors, so she would be your adjustment counselor contact if you have questions about that. Our panelists today are Leslie Stafford from Middlesex Community College, Daniel Prinson, who is an outpatient therapist, and he'll speak about his business as well. Georgia Cadiles, who is an alumni of Winchester High School and attends Lesley University. And also Stacey Harris, who is from Boston University, speaking about their counseling centers. So I'm going to give the mic over, and we really appreciate that. So enjoy lunch and enjoy a program.
Thank you. Again, my name's Leslie Stafford. I work with the Office of Disability Support at Middlesex Community College. Students who may already have a diagnosis when they're in high school, they may be in a treatment program, or they may have a therapist that they're working with, and they may recognize that they're not ready to move out of town, live in a dorm. A dorm can be really exciting. You're meeting a lot of other young people. It can also be really chaotic and noisy, and might not be the best place for a student with mental health issues to be living if you're, getting sleep deprived, or there's a lot of drinking around you, those kinds of behaviors. We also see a lot of students who do go off to college, maybe move out of state or away from home, and are, all excited to go to college, and then something goes wrong their freshman year, and maybe the first semester or the first year doesn't go well for them. Maybe they're not connecting with their roommate or other people that they live with in the dorm. They haven't found those friendships, or maybe they're experiencing mental health issues for the very first time. This is the age right around when things like eating disorders and schizophrenia, your student may have had no experience with that in the past, and that's kind of an age where some of those things might start coming about. All students have a little anxiety, and having a little anxiety is good, because that's what gets you out of bed and going to class and writing your papers and things. But students may find that they're experiencing so much anxiety that they can't concentrate on writing those papers. They can't sleep at night, or likewise depression. It's normal to find yourself sometimes in the dorm room when you feel like everybody else is out having a good time, and you haven't connected and you're feeling lonely. But if you're finding that you're not being able to get out of bed and go to class because you're too depressed and you're isolating yourself, those are some of the times when we really want students reaching out. Or if it's your roommate that you notice that this is happening to, reaching out to a residence hall assistant, a counselor, an advisor, a professor. They're all going to point you in the right direction. And some of the things that as parents you should know is that a lot of the rules change from high school to college. Parents are very involved with their students in high school, but we have privacy laws in college, meaning if your student is struggling with their classes, I can't call you up and tell you that that's going on. We certainly can call if there are emergency situations. We have called when students have been suicidal. But if your student is failing their class because they're not taking my advice, you're probably not going to be hearing from me. Or likewise, if your student comes to me and says, I don't think college is for me, and I'm thinking about withdrawing altogether, I'm not going to be calling you to tell you that information. I really can't talk to parents unless I have the student's permission to speak to parents, only in those extreme emergency situations. Most schools do have counseling services on campus. It's important if your student already has a diagnosis to get connected to something like disability support early on, so that we can look at things like accommodations. Does that student need extra time for taking tests? Is it a student that has panic attacks and maybe they need to be able to just step out of class briefly? You know, a whole host of things that they might be able to get accommodations around. And when you're in college, you can choose to use those accommodations or to not use them. So better to kind of get in and get connected, and decide like, oh, you know, maybe I'm not going to use the extra time for taking tests. I want to try it on my own. But at least it's in place so that if you find that like, oh, yeah, I took that test and I had so much anxiety that I really didn't do well, maybe I do want to take it with disability support, then it's in place. So we find many times that students aren't coming to us until they're already failing, and it's the third week in November, and then there's not enough time left in the semester to really work with that student and help kind of pull them out of their situation. Okay, so I'm going to pass it on, and then we'll have questions later.
I feel like you're a good timbre.
Okay.
Is that working? No? Yep. I've never needed a microphone. So I'm Stacey Harris. I work at BU in the Disability and Access office. I want to start by saying that I've done this work for about 25 years. I worked at Lesley and Monmouth University in New Jersey and at BU. And I say that because those of us in this world are kind of experts in 18 to 22-year-olds, and we love them, and we love this work. And I say that because some of you, it might be your first time handing over a young person who's been struggling to us. And I think the important thing to know is we wouldn't be doing this work. I can't speak for every school, but we wouldn't be doing this work if we didn't care and get them. And you know, we're not exhausted by their struggles, and as you may be, and they don't frustrate us. And so I just think it's important to start with that. I want to tell you that college is hard for all students. Transitioning to college is scary and full of anxiety and stress and bumps, and it's uncomfortable. And every 18-year-old thinks they're going to find their BFF forever and their very best roommate, and they're going to love each other, and all the food's going to be awesome, and they're going to be the most brilliant kid, and it's never going to rain, and they're captain of the dance team, and all of that is going to happen. And that doesn't happen for any of them. Even the kids with no disabilities at all, who have been to overnight camp, take no meds, and have never needed therapy. It doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. It's on social media, which we talked to your kids about this morning, if your kids are at the high school. It doesn't exist, as it doesn't for any of us in our jobs, right? So that's the reality. We don't pick our classmates. We don't know who's in the dorm. We can't pick the personality of our teacher. So there isn't a way to make it not bumpy. There isn't a way to make it smooth and beautiful and full of chocolate every day, although I would love to. That said, add into that anxiety, depression, OCD, autism spectrum disorders, schizophrenia, whatever it is, and all that anxiety and struggle tenfold. It's hard and not always easy to manage. The things we see are all of the things you're already seeing at home. Students who isolate, students who feel like they're the only ones struggling and everybody else is perfect, and why is it hard for me and it's not hard for anyone else when it's hard for all of them. All of that stuff. If you saw me speak last year, don't listen for a second, but one of the most important things is that your young humans are gonna pack up all of their favorite things at home. Their favorite sweater and their favorite picture and all of the things that are going to make the best impression of themselves into a box, and heart-shaped pictures of you, And they're going to go to school and they are all going to forget that they're in that box. All of them. And they're going to forget that if they had anxiety at home, they're going to open that box and they're going to have anxiety in the dorm. And if they cut at home, they're going to cut at school. And if whatever it is, nothing changes. And they all decide that it is going to completely be different. But they're the same human with extra stress, different food, suddenly it's snowing, and you're 3,000 miles away. So it is important ahead of time to see what we can put into place so that they're going to stay awesome, right, and successful. So I think it's really important, and again, at the high school this morning, I asked this question, which was really funny to ask just to the students. I will ask you all to think about, what are the things you still do? Do you help wake them up? Do you fill their prescriptions? Do you wash their clothes? Do you remind them about their homework? Do you drive them to therapy, yoga, whatever it is? You know, is there anything you still do? Any of you, do you still help? Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And the reality is they're super successful, probably in great part due to you, even though they would totally deny that. But I will back you on it. And so, as scary and terrifying as it is, you've got to kind of hand the baton of parenting over to them month by month between now and then, because if they're going to fall and crash, we want it to be at home, right? So how many of you help them wake up in the morning? Don't lie. I know some of you are in there, right? I have a 19-year-old still struggling. But I would say everything, actually you said it best this morning, like to be honest with your parents about what's happening. You know, say to them, I want you to be awesome when you go to college. So I'm going to stop doing, here's the 5 things I think I'm still doing. They'll tell you you're not. You are. Those 5 things. And say, okay, starting January 1st or whatever, I don't even know what month we're in, whatever. March. Next month, March. Weird month. So starting, April 1st, I'm not waking you up no matter what. But I mean it. Like, you have to go out, you have to walk the dog, you have to go to the mall, whatever it is, I don't care. You have to let them fail, because all of you know that feeling when you know that feeling when, like, oh my God, they have a test and they're not out of bed and they know that terrible, horrible feeling. You want to, like, rip that out of your chest and shove it into your kid. They need to feel that. If they don't feel it, why would they get up? Why would they? Because they know you're going to come home and drag them out of bed and get them to school on time and yell at them, and then everybody feels bad. So number 1, make that list, hand it over to them. The reality is, you're not going to be able to call us. You're not going to be, well, I let parents call me, but I don't call you. But you're not going to be able to call teachers. Teachers aren't going to know a diagnosis. It's a completely different set of laws. The accommodations are different. It's going to be different. So this process of helping them become as successful as they can with their own stuff before they get there, let them fill the prescription. Let the prescription run out. Let them feel how that feels. I could just kind of go for an hour, so I don't want to go too long. But the other thing is, they need to get the reality of it. Go to campuses and say to them, walk into the disability office, tell them who you are. Oh my God, I don't want to do that. I don't want them to know. What are the other kids going to think? They're all there for the same reason. But they have to do it. They have to read their paperwork, know what the diagnosis is, and be able to talk about it. And the last thing I'll say, real quick, is it is completely unfair to all of you that K-12 law is different than higher ed law. It's not fair. We didn't write it, I assure you, but it's not fair that when your kid graduates, IEPs and 504s no longer exist. They don't exist. I don't read them. They're illustrative. Sometimes they're fun to read. They don't count in higher ed. So that's not fair that happens. High school, they don't call us and say, hey, we're getting this fantastic kid, here's what they need. The accommodations are different. So because it's not fair, we need to get to know you ahead of time. We need to get to know them, and they need to be in the driver's seat. I'll talk about positive stuff later. Start with that? All right, we'll go there.
Want me to?
Yeah, you go first.
Hey, I'm Daniel Prinson. I'm a therapist in this community and surrounding communities, working with mostly teens and young adults and their families. and doing almost exclusively in-home work. And so I guess for the thing that I think about a lot is, one of the things I should say I think about a lot is also creating communities. And I think they've had a lot of, often they've had a lot of support, and they're transitioning and they lose some of those supports, or their relationship to their friends they think they're going to be friends with forever is changing. I find a lot of times they don't reach out to those friends in the same way. So I have a couple of students, young adults that I'm working with now, and that's a lot of what we're talking about while they're in college, and we're having those conversations. So I think for parents in this process too, it's a tough, turn 18 and all of a sudden they're adults, and they've wanted that for so long, and now they're scared shitless, and it's like, wait, how did that happen? But so I think it really shifts parental thinking in a lot of ways to the less of the do for and more of the, if you're lucky, do with, and really thinking about how, if I want to take away of one goal that you have, is when they are talking to you and you have those moments, getting them to talk as much as possible and to continue that process and further it. And you'll walk away with a swollen tongue from biting it so much, because like, well, did you try this, or did you do that, or what about, and you'll hear that thing of like, I can't listen to you anymore because you just said you didn't get up for class, and that's what I'm stuck on. But really trying to just open-ended questions to further the discussion, and in that to be looking for things also, acknowledge how they're feeling and look for things that are going well, and be curious. That's the intervention. And what's happening with your friend? And wait, is that the friend? And is that Timmy? And no, it's not Timmy. That's James. Timmy was, whatever. They get pissed, whatever they do. But as long as they're talking, and you think about them creating community and resources. So then what'd you do? Or hey, did you go out? And one, it's also what I call shock parenting, because they're expecting you to do the other stuff. Well, what about your grades? What'd you get? You get one question on that. So figure out which one you want to use it for, and then keep it moving, and be curious. And what about, what happened? You used to play the piano and actually liked it, or you talked about doing some intramurals. What happened with that? Is that still happening? Really keep those threads, and that to me is the biggest takeaway. And the other one I'd love to really say is support yourselves and each other. I mean, community, I was supposed to say my business is Injovu Counseling and Consulting. Happy to talk more about that. But the Injovu part is elephant, and it takes a herd. And I think, it's become a cliche so much. It really does. And we know that. I mean, you all know that. We can't do this alone. When we're talking to the kids today, the students, it's like, you can't do this alone, and to think that is a misstep. So how to support them, whether they're staying with you at home, whether they're going to college somewhere else, it's still changing communities. So really, when you get super curious about when they're doing things to create community, if they're if they end up connecting with someone, or they're going to lunch, or they're connecting with something that they're interested, or they're getting interested in new things, highlight that, support that in any way you can. And I really think that's a key to their success. I'll just keep saying the one thing, but it's probably like I'm now on the fourth thing. But I also just want to say, I also like to speak to the stigma of mental health, wherever you are in that range. And I really am an advocate for mind and body are connected. So everyone agrees to having a primary care doctor, or most everyone. If not, that's a separate conversation. But and also, we all need, mental health support. Doesn't mean you need a therapist you need to see every week. We need support, but it just, to me, it feels a little ignorant to think that one does not need that. I have my own therapist. Sometimes I'll see him every week, sometimes I'm seeing him once a month, sometimes we have a hiatus, whatever. But you go to the doctor and you can all relate that there's like, oh, you're stressed out, you're working too hard, you're doing too much of this. They're connected. And so just to be mindful that this is also, that's great to think about for the kids. It's also really important to think about for yourselves and your family. And what are we all doing? A lot of times I do work with families, and they're like, my kid was just hospitalized, is a recent one, 2 weeks ago. And we had a 2-hour conversation, and we talked about the kid for 10 minutes. So it's also like, sometimes it's really about what are we doing for fun as parents, or how are we supporting? Because sometimes we just squeeze a little tight, and the support opportunities slip through our fingers. So you want to be mindful of that and be real. And this is a tough time. So to being kind to yourself can also really keep you open so that you don't have tunnel vision into how you want to support, because you're having less control. And you want that because developmentally that's appropriate. So that's a way of supporting, but it looks very different than it used to. And if it doesn't, my kids are 3 and 5, and it already scares the shit out of me. So, just want to be mindful of that.
Hi, my name is Georgia, and I'm 22, and I'm at Lesley University now, and I'll graduate next year, spring 2021. And I got asked to speak here today just so I could give you guys a perspective from someone who pretty recently, transitioned from high school to college. I definitely did not have an easy time when I went and started my life at my school. So I guess basically in high school, I was definitely one of those kids that didn't listen to their parents at all. You could see me across the street from the school smoking cigarettes with my friends, and my mom was so angry. So yes, I definitely surrounded myself with other friends who also struggled with mental illness, and got into this cycle of feeding off of each other, and whatever my best friend was feeling, that was what I was feeling too. So I saw some people in high school for mental health. I saw Amber a few times. I tried seeing a therapist, but it didn't really work out. And so I didn't, and also my poor mom had never dealt with a child who had mental illness before. So she didn't know the signs. She didn't know, I wasn't talking to her, so she didn't know at all. And I let all of those different symptoms build up, and then I got shoved into a freshman dorm where I was with a girl I had no idea who she was, and I had no friends. So then my first semester, I once again went back to what I knew, found friends that also were struggling, and just started the cycle over until it built up, and I was failing all my classes. I wasn't going to class. I wasn't talking to my parents. And then it was kind of when I hit that point where I was like, wow, I really can't go on, that I sought help. And I want to talk now about the emphasis of catching things early and putting support systems in before you get to college. Especially, I know it's hard to separate, but some things you could do with your kid before you send them off is maybe go through and see what resources are available at the school they're going to. Who is in charge of those resources? What's their email? Maybe go and with your kids send them an email before they leave, and say, hey, obviously have your kid write it. Don't help them too much, but say, I'm coming to the school in the fall. Can I meet with you? Can we develop a relationship? The person I've found to be my saving grace at my school is my academic advisor, and every single person will get one when they go to school. And I found it so helpful to talk to her, and she's the link to every other resource at that school. So I tell everyone that's going to college, annoy your academic advisor, meet with them twice a month, make it a scheduled meeting. I was forced to do that, and it ended up being the best thing that could ever happen. And also, lots and lots of schools have so many free resources. My school has free tutoring, which is done by other students, but your academic advisor gives you every single thing you need to set up free tutoring when you're struggling in classes. My school has therapists on campus that you can meet with, basically anytime you want. And they say, oh, it's only 10 sessions, and then you get directed to someone outside of the school, but lots of times they'll meet with you more. They'll meet with you in crisis. They'll meet with you if you just want to talk about anything. So something that I struggled with a little bit was taking the time to realize that like my mental health was just as important as my friends. Like even if it seems like someone else is struggling more than me, having that confidence and that like self-love to say, oh, you know, I need to take a step back and stop thinking about my friends that's struggling and think about, oh, I'm struggling right now and how can I help myself so that I can even be there to help my friend. Because if you're just giving all your energy to someone else, then you're going to burn out so quickly. And my mom and I, we don't do it as much anymore, but when I was really struggling, it helped to have like set up lunches, because I go to school in Cambridge, so it's not too hard. But if your kid's overseas or like across the country, set up phone calls, like say, I'm going to call you at this time every week, please be available, and just ask questions. Don't interrogate, because I know I get annoyed with my mom when she interrogates me, but you know, just ask like about like you're talking to your friend, because that your relationship is going to change from parent to friend, and that's a big step. So, and it's really exciting when your kid stops looking at you and being mad that you're telling them what to do, and then starts looking at you and saying, oh, I want to hang out, like let's talk about life. Something that I feel my mom probably would have wanted to know before I left are some signs to see if your kid's struggling. For me, what I noticed about myself was at times of struggle, I would have extreme weight loss. I wouldn't talk to my parents. I wouldn't go to class. And also, like, eating habits were just all over the place. I've noticed that in a lot of people is like when you're struggling, your eating is just like so out of whack. So I guess that's a big thing to look for. And just telling your kid to remember that they're important. I know you guys definitely say that all the time, but like just keep saying it. And honesty is definitely the number one, with honesty with your kid and making sure your kid's being honest with you. Like, don't feel scared to say, you know, I'm scared for you right now because I don't know what's going on with you and you're not talking to me. You know, like saying, even talking to them about if you're having a hard time can open up the discussion for them to be like, oh, you know what, I'm also having a hard time. And yeah, just keep going. It gets so much easier. I know my parents can tell you, like, I was a problem child, and now now we hang out all the time, and it's great. So it gets better. And there's so many resources for your kid to succeed, and you guys probably all have done a great job so far, and they're going to do good. Yeah.
So we're using the microphone. So what we'll do is we're going to give everybody opportunities to ask questions. We also, like a couple of the panelists have said, we did do a morning program with your seniors. It was a mandatory program. About 150 came. But hey, those are the 150 that we reached, and there was some really nice questions from the audience as well. And Nicole and I talked with a few seniors beforehand and got some questions, but we would love to hear what you would like to field. Also, Georgia's parents are in the audience, so just so you guys know. Good to know, and we're glad you're here. And so, yeah, let's continue the conversation about mental health after high school. So, any questions? Nicole will come to the microphone.
All your kids attended, by the way.
So I have one comment and a question. I hope I can do both. The first one is that the comment is that the helicopter parenting is such a big push. I have two kids, I should say. I have a freshman at Wentworth and I have a fourth year at Northeastern. So both my kids are in college, across the street from each other, which is very nice for pick up and drop off. So you know, the helicopter parenting is such a big thing right now. Like, don't ask your kids questions and let them do things on their own and don't bother them. And I think that that's a big issue sometimes with kids who have more issues, because you need to be a little bit of a helicopter helicopter parent. So I think part of it, the hardest part with them going off to college was finding that balance between asking questions and not, asking too much. But my question is this. My older son at Northeastern hasn't had any issues, but I'm on a parent support page that, a lot of the colleges have, so all the parents are asking questions about, what size plastic drawers fit in the closet and, all that fun stuff. But a lot of questions that pop up too are, my kid's really struggling, I picked them up at break and they've lost 15 pounds, they broke up with a boyfriend and they don't know what to do about it, and, I don't know what to do. And I think this whole, once they turn 18, you can't, ask too many questions and get the medical things, but at the same time, when you're at a distance especially, and you're concerned about them. So if you could speak to that struggle of not a kid who necessarily has an issue ahead of time, so you're not, in any kind of system to begin with, and you're trying to figure out how to push your kid towards going to the health science center, or you know what I'm saying, that aspect of it.
Sure. Yeah, all hard. Where to begin? So, and again, I can only speak for the places where I've worked and where I am now. So students with and without disabilities struggle and fall apart and isolate, and I think that we all understand that their first year more do than not. All of us are on the lookout for issues that are coming up: isolating, self-harm, not communicating in class. Faculty report to us when there's a student in the back crying, or they'll reach out to the advisor. I mean, I think the thing to know is there's a network in place at all schools. And for example, at BU, every student has an ID that gets them into every building. If they turn the ID over, it has 6 phone numbers on it, including health services, behavioral medicine. All of it is right there in their wallet. And everyone is told where to go. Some students don't want to do that, and that's part of the growing up process too. That's hard. Usually someone will see it along the way, talk to them about it, and get them moving in the right direction. But as with all humans, we can't force them to go to a tutor. We can't force them to get therapy. We can't make them do those things, and that's part of the learning process. I do find when they fall, when they kind of see the light, they do seem to say, oh, maybe I should, do some more self-care and check in more. But I would say we do notice, it's not always reported to the parents that they've talked to us, my office or others. But it's true, we don't reach out to parents. It's not that they're adults, we call them adult light. They're on their way. But I think it's not a therapeutic environment, and I think that's a really important piece to talk about, is that when we have someone who's hospitalized, I never advocate for a hospital to dorm. If you need a lot of intervention, probably being away from home in a dorm isn't right today. But that doesn't mean it won't be right. So I think there's a lot of balance that happens, and when something comes up in the middle, first onset bipolar, first psychotic break, eating disorder, whatever it is, students may need to take a break, and we put supports in place when they come back. But I think it's an ongoing conversation. Also, I would say if your child had one leg and wanted to use a prosthetic, people don't seem to have stigma about that. But if they have ADD or anxiety or bipolar, they don't seem to want to reach out. It's either minimized internally by their peers, they're ashamed, so we may offer supports that they're like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't know if that answered.
And I would add to kind of let your student know that they certainly are not the only one who's in that place. Out of a student body of about 6,000 students, we probably have well over 1,000 students who are identified as students with disabilities. And I'll say 99% of those disabilities are invisible disabilities, whether it's dyslexia or mental health or autism. So just because they're looking around and it seems like everybody else around them kind of has it and knows what they're doing, doesn't mean that a large number of those students aren't also wrestling with those same issues.
Could I just ask one question? Stacey, I know that BU, you kind of touched upon if a student's out for a hospitalization and then coming back. Do you still have the transition program at BU?
We do. So, so we have a therapy office where we have counselors and therapists and psychiatrists and physicians and all that stuff. And then we have my office that does kind of academic, dietary, and housing accommodations. But we also have an office related to anxiety. We have lots of supports. But we do have a program called Nateo. It's not an acronym. I think it's a Greek word that means transition or something awesome. But they do two things. They probably do more than that. One is a program where once you've been hospitalized and you want to transition back to college, they have a semester where they offer, not just for BU students, but all sorts of supports and programs, and I believe a one-credit academic class where they can start to learn what does it mean to balance mental health with an academic load, an academic environment. And so they spend a full semester not taking classes, but learning all these skills to kind of transition back. And then whether students have done that program or not, Nateo's a place where they can go and just kind of hang out with other students that have mental health challenges in a non-therapeutic environment, but just no stigma. Like, hey, everybody there has depression or anxiety or OCD, but we're studying together, and there's no obligation to be there. But it just kind of feels better to go to a Dungeons and Dragons night or whatever they're having and not have to worry that people are going to judge. So, yes.
I'm going to pass it down.
You don't have to speak very loudly. I've been known to do that.
Well, is it when you're handed the microphone you forget what you're going to ask? But first of all, you burst into tears. I've been known to do that. Well, first of all, I do want to say one of the things that we were told by Dot Butler not to give up is doing laundry. I remember specifically, I don't know where Dot is, but and keep doing it through senior year because you find things that you otherwise would not have found if you were not doing their laundry. That brings great conversation. Why is this bottle cap in your pocket? Okay, or vape pen or whatever it is. So don't have them do that just yet. But so if we know that catching mental health early, so they don't get down too low, is super important, right? We know that, and we know red flags like not attending class, bad grades are red flags. Why? Please tell me why you cannot reach out to the parents. If the red flags are there, I can't understand this. You don't get their grades, so you don't have any indicators other than, how are you doing? Fine. How are things going today? Fine. I mean, that's all you get. So I am grappling with how we do this.
Sure. I mean, there's a privacy law in place for higher ed that we didn't.
And we paid the bills.
Yes, but again, there's a privacy law in place that we didn't write. That
I just want to say
Wait
that
for the mic just because it's being recorded.
Well, do you want to answer that question, or is that?
mine's related.
Okay.
sure.
But I just want to say at my daughter's college, on her first orientation day, we sat down at the computer and they said, do you want your parents to have access to this? Do you want your parents to have access to this? Do you want your parents to have access to this? And we said, this is our deal. You know, we're paying for this. This is a big financial commitment, and we need to be involved. We're not going to overtake, but we need to be able to have a feel for how things are going. So we have access. And that's the way I'm sure all schools have a system.
Yes and no. So even at BU, and I can't speak for other schools, but students can sign away that their parents can have access to their grades, but they can't call and talk to faculty or call and talk to us without the student present. So, and we don't reach out unless there's a dire emergency.
Right. We were talking about this at lunch, that when a student comes to the Office of Disability Support and they do have a mental health diagnosis, we may ask them to sign a waiver so that I can contact their therapist if I'm concerned about things. And I always tell my students that, look, I'm not just going to call your therapist behind your back. You're probably going to be in the room with me because the student might just not have the wherewithal at that moment to be explaining what's going on. And we do now have students fill out an emergency contact. It may or may not be the parent. It's whoever the student wants listed. So we can call in cases of emergency, but yeah, the privacy laws, just like if you came to me and you were discussing things, I wouldn't be calling your mother to tell you what's going on. And right. And I, during things like during the intake process, when I have students come in and talk to me, I really like to meet with the student alone first, because I want to get a sense of how well does this student even know their own diagnosis. They might just be like, oh, I don't know, sometimes I have difficulty concentrating, and then you're looking at their documentation and it's talking about hallucinations and, really kind of high level stuff. So it gives us a chance to see, how much does the student, are they aware of everything that's going on, and how much have they really been sheltered, and how much is the mental health diagnosis impacting their thought process.
I just have something to add is that you don't really have to wait to see red flags. Like, I don't know how many of you have an hour of your day that is dedicated to just you, but if your kid's open to it, why not just get a therapist just to have an hour once a month or once every 2 weeks to just talk about yourself? I find it very beneficial. Like, you don't have to have a serious mental health diagnosis to see a therapist. It's therapy. Like, it's like meditation. It just restarts your day.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I also think that this is where you need to try on each school and try on the support system. So if you think that your student is going to need a lot of check-ins or some one-to-one support and coaching, some schools might be better than others. And I think that really matters. And I think when we look, accommodations in higher ed, there's no cookie cutter process. It's not, they have OCD and so they get these 5 things. It's not like that. So we measure the current disability and symptoms, current documentation, and what's reasonable in an academic environment. So if your child has symptoms where attendance is always going to be a problem, that's not going to work in a lot of majors, and in a lot of places we can't accommodate that, even if it's current, significant, and a really big deal. Some classes are group work. Some classes are call and response. So if that's the nature of the class, we can't lower those standards. I always make fun of math. If it's like a boring math class and it's all on Blackboard, then we can be flexible with attendance. But it's really an individualized look. So when you're looking at schools, walk that campus. If the counseling center is in a basement and they've never heard of OCD, that's not the right school for you. Same with any diagnosis. And some schools have specialized programs and lots more support, but if you anticipate that there's going to be a lot of problems along the way, it's either not time, and that's okay, or you need a different type of school. They're not all, a lot of schools are not going to be okay with a lot of accommodations. So for example, we don't give trigger warnings. We don't do extensions on out-of-class assignments for the most part. If you need to do a presentation, you have to be able to get called on. You don't get a single room just because you anticipate that it might be hard to live with someone else. And some of that is that we're trying to prepare them for jobs. Believe me, I didn't pick the 10 people that I work with. I love them and they're brilliant, and some days we don't want to be around each other, and we're trying to help them become employable and good members of society and good citizens and good neighbors, and we can't do that by modifying everything. It just doesn't work that way, and that's hard and uncomfortable and messy.
You know, just to speak further to that point, my older son, like I said, is at Northeastern. Northeastern is a crazy college. It's a fantastic college, but co-ops are a competition. So when you, at 3 times potentially during your 5 years or 4 years or whatever you end up doing, it's all different looks there, you are competing with all the other biology majors for the best co-ops. So you're going, you know, the people that you're sitting next to in class that you become friendly with, to some degree, you know, some kids thrive on that competition. Some kids, it's like starting all over again, applying to colleges. You know, that whole stress of that. There's people, you know, that are in study abroad, and then they're on something called DOCS there, which is a dialogues where you go for a month to Machu Picchu, or you go to Antarctica, and you're studying with one professor for one class for a month. So you're changing roommates every 6 months. Your roommate's on co-op in California, so now you have a new roommate. You're coming back from California, so now you're with a different person. So people who are not made to tolerate that so much, they're going to really struggle there, and I find that pops up in the parent group there sometimes. Yeah. So again, like we were just talking about, trying to find the right college, it's not only the support systems in terms of the wellness center or whatever it may be called at your college, but it's also just the feel of the college in terms of that I find pops up in the parent support page a lot at his university because of that stress of, oh my God, I didn't know this was going to happen. I didn't know this was going to be this intense for co-op. Why is it so hard? You know, that type of stuff. So that may be a university that doesn't work for certain people. It's a wonderful university, but it is intense. And you've raised your hand like 5 times, so I'm going to pass it on to you.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, have you ever come across with a student and you definitely feel that he or she has a mental issue and you really want to help her or him, and but that student refused to get help, and the student also refused to tell the parents. So do you have strategies, you know, how to handle with this kind of, you know, students to help them?
Sure. So I had mentioned I'm on a student assessment and intervention team because issues may pop up anywhere on campus, not necessarily in the Office of Disability Support, but if a student writes in their English class in a paper that they're having suicidal thoughts, or they may write about something that's really bizarre. I had a student one time who had missed several classes and then came back to class and started telling his teacher about how he had been kidnapped and had something implanted in his brain and somebody was tracking him and stuff. So we have something called a small incident form where professors or any staff member on campus can put in, and we reach out to those students. Sometimes they're students who are already known to us. If they're not, we'll pick a member of the team to reach out to that student and try to get them to the appropriate resources. And we try to do that before there's a conduct issue or before they're failing their classes. But ultimately, I can't force somebody into therapy if they really don't want to go. That's why, you know, even with homeless population, you can't force people into it if they don't want to go. We can offer many resources both on campus and off campus, but ultimately, you know, and you know, we'll keep at it. It's not like I'm just going to try one time with a student. If issues keep popping up, we will talk about like what's the consequences if you just continue down this path, and you know, it may take 5 or 10 times of reaching out to that student, but we'll continue to do that.
Did you want to speak? Yeah, I can add that was me for a while, where I didn't want any sort of professional help. And like as crappy as it is, a lot of times it takes just like getting to a point where you're like, oh, I need some help. And what's helpful in that time before you get to that low point where you're like, okay, I'm going to do something about it, you can just send an email to your kid with, oh, look at this cool resource at your school. And I know it's like so cheesy, but Amber does that to me sometimes, where she gives me little cheesy things to do, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to do that. But then eventually,
It's okay.
but then I'm like, oh, that's too cheesy. I'm not going to do that. But then eventually I'm like, oh, you know what? That thing that Amber told me might actually be pretty helpful right now. So it takes some time sometimes, and it takes work. Finding a therapist takes work in itself. Like, I had to go through a few before I found one that actually clicks. So, like, staying consistent, just knowing what your options are, and even if it gets down to that low point, like, that's okay. That happens a lot, but you can easily get back up. Not easily, but you can.
So my question is, you had mentioned evaluating, mental health supports in college, and what questions should we be asking, and how do we know if it's the right fit, and what are some of the red flags we should look out for?
It's a great question.
So I would, trust in your child that they're going to know what feels good. I mean, I think when something feels wrong, but they're the ones who are going to live there and be there. I would say when any diagnosis comes up, I ask students, if a student comes in with a diagnosis that I have not heard of, I want to make sure that I can give the right support. Now, one thing I think is important is a disability office isn't a counseling office. I rely on, I could never know all the disability diagnoses out there. I rely on your expert. Whoever is treating your child, they're my expert for your child, as long as you're not writing the documentation, which has happened. So I would say really talking about it. Have you worked with students with mental illness? What sort of accommodations have you done? How do faculty handle it? What support groups do you have on campus? Do you accommodate attendance? Do you I would think about your individual young human and what they've really needed. And I would look at, what are the supports that have made them successful? How much therapy can they have on campus? Is there a team of people that communicate? Do they have a gym? Are there yoga classes? Can they have prescriptions filled on campus? Are there support groups? Any of the things that you have, if they say, oh, no, we don't do that here, that might not be your best place to be. And you can say, at BU we have, speakers come in and talk about different topics. If they've look through the website. If they've never had a speaker come in to talk about mental illness, the campus might not have an awareness. And I should just say on a personal note, I know I sound a little, I know I can sound tough about what we do and what we don't, but I will just tell you, I spent my entire high school years personally hospitalized with parents that thought that I was going to be gay and tried to get me trained out of it in Massachusetts. It didn't work, in case you were curious. But I get it. I get what it's like to go from hospital and hating yourself and anxiety to adulthood. So I know that I sound tough about the rules, but I get it as a parent, as who I was and now. So believe me, every student I meet with, I want to be like, oh my God, I totally get it. But I also get the reality of, all of you have had jobs, if you went to work half the time, if you fell apart at your desk, if you wanted to room with your best friend, if you wanted an office cubicle next to your best friend so that they could help you every time you felt self-abusive, that doesn't work. So I get it. I'm also a client. I get it. But there's reality to this that's real.
I also want to mention that you may think that you have found the perfect school, and it may have all those resources, and things still might fall apart.
Great point.
And I think sometimes that can leave students with the feeling of like, oh, college is not for me, and now what? And what I tell my own daughter and what I tell my students is that there's not one path in life to getting a college education. It's okay to take a couple of years off and figure some things out. It's okay to live at home and go to community college and then go on and get a bachelor's degree. It's okay to decide that, like, oh, I was going to study physics, but that's not going to work for me, and maybe I really want to be a plumber instead. And supporting students in those decisions, because, we kind of get this idea that you graduate from high school, you go to a 4-year college, you graduate within 4 years, and then you go out and get this wonderful job, or you get a master's degree in whatever. And for a large portion of students, that's not the path that they end up taking. So many students end up changing majors, changing schools, taking a gap year, taking time off in the middle of a degree. There is no one path for all students, and that's okay.
And we hope they're not so worried about what they're doing that they stay on a path that doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
We hope they change majors and, oh, now I want to study abroad. Who knew exactly what they wanted to do at 18 and never changed anything? That's pretty rare.
Yeah.
I have a thought, but Dot, you wanted to say something, Dot?
No, I just someone had a question before she leaves.
Oh.
She would let me leave.
Passes on to you.
I caught on Dot's like, don't leave. First of all, Georgia, thank you for speaking so eloquently. Like, that was really brave. What I would like to ask you is sort of a scenario which you may or may not have had, but you're having a bad time at school, your mom shows up, and your mom, what we want to say is, oh my God, how are you? Is everything okay? Like, are you eating? Are you doing that? Like, that's our nature. What should we do? Like, how should that conversation, I know that sounds, right, isn't that right? We all want to know, like, oh my God, you look horrible, what's going on? Who hasn't been there? Okay, sorry. So what I want to know, I have a kid in college, so I want to know, like, from your perspective, how should that conversation go? How should it really
Good
go?
question. This has happened to me a lot. What I like to see when I know that I want to talk to my mom every time that I'm struggling, but sometimes it can be hard. Like, you don't want to hurt your mom's feelings, I know that it's in, like, a perfect world, it shouldn't hurt anyone's feelings to talk about, like, your own mental illness, but it can be hard. So, planning just literally something fun and not bringing it up. Just having a nice, relaxing time. Like, no matter what your kid says, hanging out with your mom is a huge comfort. Like, or your dad, of course.
Thank you for that, too.
And, like, I feel a lot of times with me, if my mom's like, hey, like, let's go to this restaurant that you like, and she just is talking to me about her life, like, it naturally comes. Instead of when she's like, Georgia, like, what's going on? Why have you lost so much weight? Blah, 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 blah. Then that's when I'm pushing back. Like, I definitely want to say what's really happening, but when it's thrust upon me, so, like, I don't know. When it's just thrust upon me, then it's harder to think about how you're really feeling and, like, what you actually want to say. I hope that gives some clarity. It's everyone's different, like. But you know what your kid likes to do for fun. Why don't you try and do that too? Like, and then that's another bonding thing as well.
Yeah, thank you, Georgia. I can't highlight enough the need for normalcy in chaos, and how that it feels like such a different intervention, and it is so important. Curiosity, and for you to stay in yourself too is so important. You want to jump out his skin, you want to strangle instead of hug, and how to open that up. But to really slow down that process and show up. And I think the self-disclosure thing for parents is an interesting thing too, because sometimes you want to really keep things close to the vest, and it's a great modeling too. I mean, I love I'm struggling with, like the I statements, right? But I'm having a tough time with this too. I'm trying to figure out as a helicopter parent how to, remove one of the what is it, arms of the helicopter? Propellers. You know, so, and maybe you can help me with that process so that we're in this together. You know, I think that really, when it's a do with, you know, and you're together in that process, it's so valuable. And I think even when asking like the question around what makes a good, how do you find a good counselor or something, I think that conversation about how to find a good counselor, what questions do you ask? I would also ask, what questions, how do you support your child in figuring out what questions they want? What does make a good counselor? What did you like? What didn't you like? I mean, I always say try 3 sessions. That's sort of the blanket. I know you didn't like them the first time. Give them 3 sessions. And it is really important. You're asking the right questions. Or the fact that that conversation is happening, it's like, this is great. And it's a great intervention as a parent to not have all the answers. And I actually don't know. Or can we figure this out? I know it would work for me, but I don't know what would work for you. I mean, that is so powerful that it just keeps, keep it moving. And if you're furthering that process, and then it's so important to have someone else that where you can then go after and say, I can't believe I did not ask. I so wanted to ask this question, or be like, are you kidding me? And so pull your hair out somewhere else, or do it in a tempered way of like, I want to, or even name it, and humor is so great. Food and humor, or doing things together that are fun. You can't stress them enough. I have a family right now that talking about humor, but when they come home for the holidays, or they just went together. They went to the Wilbur, and they went to go see John Mulaney. I think it was at the Wilbur or something. But or just even watching short clips. And then the other thing is I love the emailing. I'm surprised you said emailing, Georgia. I was thinking texting. But if you're thinking about them and you want to intervene to help yourself, maybe you just send a text, I love you. Or thinking about you, or here's a resource. I know I'm being that other. Bitmojis are great if you know what those are, because those are those ones emojis that kind of look like you. But if you do one of those and send it, there's a way that's kind of funny, you're a parent thinking you're cool and trying to be hip, and you're not doing a great job. But there's some, yeah. I'm not. I was talking about the people that are in the outside trying to get in, but But the humor piece is such a great way to break that cycle and pattern. That's the shock parenting piece. You do things differently, or even if you're doing that, you continue to do that. It gets that message in, and they are always listening. And that's the thing to know, but it has to settle below the eyebrows sometimes.
I would say don't talk more than 10 minutes. And they usually have the answer. So instead of giving them the answer, I would say, what do you think you should do? I also find that all of our students are amazing friends, but they're really crappy to themselves. So if saying to them, how would you advise your best friend to do this? They'll be like, oh my God, I would tell her to go see this person and not eat that food, and that boy she's dating is horrible. And then, but they are great advisors to everyone else. And so say, oh, that's great advice.
Yeah.
And I can't stress enough, having a kid that's going through hard stuff it gives us our own PTSD. It really does. So as much as you can have a parent support group and other people to talk to for yourselves, so that you can text your friend, as you were saying, oh my God, I wanted to say this thing, have a group of people where you check in with them first and say, should I do this, and brainstorm it together with other adults that have kids that are struggling, and then decide what you're going to do. Because again, we are there. We do exist, and they're going to be, I was saying earlier, unless they're riding a motorcycle without a helmet or doing drugs, they're going to be okay. It might not always feel great, but there's not going to be an emergency in that moment. So that's what I would say.
And one more humor thing there, but it just, Stacey reminded me of it too, is you can also just, when they when they say something, you can also take it on as your own and be like, as humor, and be like, yeah, what would you ask me? This is the advice to other people, but listen, I don't care about your problems, kid. If you're in that kind of humor way, but I'm really struggling. I can't get to my work on time, and I'm supposed to do this my work for my boss, and I don't know what to do, and I'm really struggling. What would you tell me to do? And they kind of know you're talking about them, but you're not in this humor, and it's just and they often have really good advice.
Remember when they were little and you would shake the keys so they would look somewhere else? I mean, I find my son's turning 20, and I find if he's really dug in and upset about something, I will talk about something completely separate. Be like, oh my God, you're living somewhere else and it's snowing here, and I just have this completely different conversation, and because he thinks we're gonna like start grilling him, and then he's like, oh, it's snowing? I'm like, oh, good.
Yeah.
Like, and I go back around and grill him. I don't sometimes, but I do think talking about something else really matters.
Question. I have a daughter who's about to go to college next year, and one of the things that keeps me up at night is reading statistically and also anecdotally, actually, the number of college freshmen who don't return for a spring semester, or perhaps by sophomore year, which in the dinosaur age when I went to college, that was kind of unheard of, that kind of mobility across campuses didn't really happen. You know, if someone transferred, it was after sophomore year, it was unusual. Okay, so can you unpack that a little based on all the things you've said and understanding what I think it's great that there's less stigma around some of the mental health and the accommodations, things that are helping, but I would imagine that this is a very scary thing on college campuses from the college administrative side. You don't want to have those many open beds. Spring semester, so the financial but also could you unpack for me a little bit about what are some of the reasons why that's happening nationally? And I know it varies from campus to campus and state to state, but that's one of the things I think about in terms of the fit. So as a parent, some of it's like, oh, well, it's not so hard to change if you're not happy, right? But then that also seems like a huge thing to have to undertake when you're like at the end of your freshman year. So those are the things that keep me up at night, and wonder if you could just sort of enlighten me and others maybe around why that seems to be happening more than it ever did.
I mean, we talk a lot about the difference between fitting in and belonging, you know, and kind of the expectations on a college campus around what does it mean to be a part of the community. So they have this expectation, as I was saying before, about meeting their best friend and everything's going to be perfect and no stress. And that for us, fitting in means you're taking part of yourself off to fit in with other people, but belonging means, you know, you kind of belong anywhere. And I think really working with, I mean, we work a lot with students around, you know, you need to get out beyond just your roommate or the people in your class. I mean, we're a 3-mile campus where we have 500 student organizations, but it doesn't mean anyone goes to them. And it's all about making the perfect friend group. And I think talking to your children up front around, you might not really dig your roommate. It's just a place where you sleep, or, you know, you might switch. I think setting expectations around the fact that things change. I tell students to try a different cafeteria one day a week. Like every Monday you're in one place and every Wednesday you're somewhere else. So you'll see different people. But I think it's that belonging piece. It's not just about mental health and going to yoga, and you might not like certain people, and I think they get there and they're like, and you please speak to this, it's like, this is my safety blanket away from my family, and if this doesn't work, everything's terrible, and I quit. But, you know, they need to kind of get beyond that a little and try different things. And like with a therapist, like if it doesn't feel good, it's okay to drop that and pick something else. We talk a lot about retention and, you know, why do students leave? And a lot of it is around that it didn't feel great the first minute, and, you know, that we're always changing orientation to see if there are ways to get them. There's always going to be someone who doesn't feel connected, but I think it's important to encourage them to reach out in different ways. I wish they all wouldn't rush a sorority day one, you know, and to be mindful and, you know, hey, have you tried the gym? Have you tried hanging out with people from class or from your dorm? But you know, it's hard when you're new and then dealing with therapy, and I think it's doing too much is the biggest hurdle. And you know, parents are saying, join a club and join this, and how's it all going? And they kind of need to get there and kind of chill a little and feel it out.
The mental health advice I got in 1979 from my parents, which in some ways at the time felt, some people would think was harsh, was like, you're not coming home until Thanksgiving. We'll come up for Parents' Weekend, and you're not coming home till Thanksgiving.
That's not terrible advice.
And I know, and you know what? It was the best advice I ever got. But here I am now. It's not 1979. My daughter's going off in 2020, and there's part of me that's like, "You're not coming home till Thanksgiving."
Yeah, that's not.
And
bad
I
advice.
feel like if she has the if there's nothing else going on with her in terms of from a mental health perspective at that time. But the point was that forced me to get community. I wanted to come home. Sure I did. Probably every first weekend for the first 6 weeks. And I think this is the struggle, right? Oh, you don't want to miss something, right? With a kid, you don't want to be like, no, I really don't think you should do this because I think this will be better for you.
They need to know you
But-
trust us. I think that's another piece. If you're checking on everything, they're hearing that you don't trust us. Maybe you don't trust us, and that's okay too. But I think if they're hearing like, hey, is this happening? Is this happening? That doesn't give them any reason to trust us and reach out to us. You know, and I would say like answer every third phone call. You know, answer every third text. You know, and just know we really are there. We would love to talk to them.
And you also, in part of that too, you were asking why, right? And I really think, you know, there's a reason anxiety is now the =1 diagnosis as opposed to depression. And even 15 years ago when in this work, we used to think mental health-wise, which track are you on? Are you on the anxious track? Are you on the depressive track? Now they're on both. And it's like, and I really think a lot of it, you know, let's name it, screen time.
Yeah.
And the impulsivity and how that changes the brain. And everyone wants something now. And you can get that access, you know, not just screen time, but internet and everything. And that really has created a shift. So I think, you know, I like your strategy also. And I think I like it if it works. And I think,
that's what I'm gonna
yeah, but hold it in there.
Parenting now
Yeah.
versus, you know, like I was
Yes.
like, we're gonna have a junior year like it's 1978.
Yeah.
And that worked great until my daughter was like, I thought we were having a junior year like it was 1978.
Yeah.
I thought we were.
I think,
We're not.
I think
You know, it's
yes.
Those are, you know, things that those are my parental
Yeah.
anxieties, right? That I don't want to then, because there's so much, right? For the
Yes.
kids today that spills over from, they're getting it from their peers, they're getting it from their parents
Yeah.
too. So.
And I think it's so important when you're trying to think about that is not to rule anything out as an intervention or as a parental support game plan. So that, yeah, it could be that and hold that, you know. Also be skillful enough to know when it's not working. Because and to know that it's not like, you know, it's not the same time. So, you know, generationally things some of them still work and some don't. And, you know, it's not a one size fits all. So, yeah.
And a lot of schools are experimenting with different things like, you know, some schools will say to their freshmen, nobody leaves on the weekends to go home for the first month of school. They're doing a lot more programming so that students have alternatives to, like, maybe not going out and getting drunk on a Saturday night. You know, having a lot, whether it's like going to watch a classic movie or learning how to juggle or, you know, whatever the programming is. And that may be students who are used to being online all the time, whether it's gaming or watching YouTube videos or whatever it is, getting out and doing something in the real world. I've heard of colleges having programs within the dorms because they're finding that students aren't even talking to their roommate and just asking them simple questions like, where are you from and who are your friends and what are your interests? They don't know how to necessarily have those face-to-face conversations. And so,
There's a lot more only children. too.
right, and there's many people having their own bedroom and not having to share with a sibling.
But it's also, I mean, the world is different.
It is.
And one of the things, one of the things that they said at Wentworth, which surprised me, but I understood fully when we were at orientation, is they say one of the hardest things your kids are going to have to learn to do is to talk to the professors when they're having an issue
Yes.
and to email them or to text, because they're so used, they don't pick up the phone. My kids don't really answer the phone.
Well-
You know, they talk by text and by, you know, whatever, Snapchat out, you know, there's 1,000 different things and they change every year. So they have a different way than we did of
Yeah.
interacting with people, and especially with older, you know, adults.
And one thing that I think happens a lot is that a lot of students get through high school really easily without studying, with putting in the bare minimum, and then they get to college and it's all of a sudden, wow, this is so much harder, and I do have to study and I don't know how to study. I don't know how to take good notes. I don't really know how to read the textbook and get the information out of it. Whether that's a student going to Harvard or to Middlesex Community College, I hear it again and again.
So we have time for one more question, and then we're going to wrap it up. Stacey, I don't know if you want to add it.
I was just going to say the best possible thing you can do before you send them is to get them used to communicating.
Yeah.
And that's our number one challenge, is that they are not talking to each other. Teach, what is it called, Forest? I mean, there are some apps they can put on their phone where, like, trees die if they're using it too much. I mean, get them, I mean, not real trees. Not real trees. Trees on the app. Virtual trees. Adding to climate change issues. But getting them used to, if they're having a conflict with their friend, don't brainstorm it with them. Like, make them talk to their sibling. Remember the sister sweater where you had to be in the sweater with your sibling till you worked it out? I mean, it's not wrong to get them to start engaging, because they're going to this is 4 years till a job, right? They're going to have to negotiate for salary. They could have group interviews. Like, they're going to have to do that. We hope they have internships along the way. So they've got to learn how to talk to each other. They have to learn how to talk to you appropriately.
In ways that work for both of you.
Yes.
I'm constantly telling my students that if they're going to be out for either a treatment session or they've kind of hit that wall where they feel like, I'm about to fall apart and I need to take a little break, emailing your professors, because then they know that you're still interested in the class. You're not just blowing it off, and that's part of being an adult. And if you don't communicate with the professor, they're going to assume that you're just not interested and that you're walking away from this class.
Okay, do we have one last question?
What would be your advice in trying to teach them or encourage them to have that conversation? Because I think that's part of what's hard is I can sit here and tell them, go talk to the professor or go have a conversation. But honestly, if they don't really know how or get the practice, or they can't even talk to each other, right? I mean, honestly, full disclosure, I teach at Tufts, so I am a professor, and I've had students tell me it feels awkward to talk to their friends to get to those programming, right? They don't want to go to an event because they don't want to go to by themselves, but it's awkward to ask other people.
Right. I would definitely set the expectation now. I mean, we have students who they don't get along with their roommate, and the next thing I know, their parents have called the president or the dean of students saying she needs a single. And the first response is, have they gone through the mediation program with the RA? Have they talked to the hall? There's like 7,000 steps before the dean of students. And they're all in place. So setting the expectation that, when you get there, you're going to have these conversations, but anything happens from now to commencement or wherever they are right now, tell them they're going to have to do it. If you are at a restaurant, they have to order. I know that sounds funny, but they don't. They won't order. If you want something at a store, you have to ask for it. We're not going to buy online. We're actually going to go to Target. I think that it sounds silly, but that's the practice. And also saying something horrible like, I'm not going to pay for high-speed internet on your phone. You've got to learn how to communicate.
I think also I talk a lot with students around self-respect points that they give themselves, and to really think it's something that you can control. So when you do difficult things, it's less on outcome. That's what I love about it. So if you're asking someone out, or if you're trying to be part of a group, or you want to get a friend to go with you, I just have the conversation of like, let's think about, forget the outcome of what goes on, but you're doing something that's difficult. So let's talk about, the good news is you get self-respect points, and those are really great and build inside of you. So so this is going to be really hard. And, let's see, I want to see how you feel. I'll be with, let me know how it goes. When are you doing it? Sometimes I'll have parents say, are you going to, it's tonight, I'm going to be thinking about you. That could be, and then let me know how many self-respect, what do you give yourself? How many self-respect points did you get? Because you're going to get them. And then, it didn't work. I said, didn't work? Yeah, it did work. What are you talking about? Oh, yeah, right, I forgot. They didn't go with you, but you did it. And that is awesome. And you got some self-respect points. So pat yourself on the back, get yourself a hot chocolate with whipped cream, and you'll, and that will happen another day. Great job. And then that's the message that, the tag phrase from beginning and the end of that conversation.
Last thing to add, I also, lots of times when I was in school, I always had this impression that like every person that I wanted to be friends with had to be my best friend. So maybe like talking more and like keeping open communication about the fact that not everyone has to be your best friend. Like your roommate can be just your roommate and you can only talk about roommate things, and you can have a friend in science class that you like only talk to in science class. Like building little tiny relationships makes it easier to build big ones.
That's a great piano.
So we're gonna wrap things up. We want to thank you guys for taking the time to come and speak and listen about mental health after high school. We've been talking a lot about how do we set them up for success, and what does that success personally look like for your young student. And so we want you guys to come to guidance too here at the high school. So your guidance counselor, your teens guidance counselor, Nicole works specifically with the seniors, so she would be your adjustment counselor contact if you have questions about that. This isn't just a one and done conversation. We also have a really wonderful new service for Winchester residents, which is the free referral service for mental health interface, and we have that information available over here to be partnering with that. So please use that. We have been using that, and we want to work together to support your young people move beyond Winchester High. So thank you guys.
Can I say that one thing about that service too that's great, is that they are the ones that they'll help to find a therapist. They don't just sort of hand over. They'll make the phone calls. They'll find someone that feels like they'll ask you and interview you. Look on the website. They give you a nice one-pager. The card's there also.
Yeah.
But it's really great because you think, a lot of times people are, the fear of parents is that they're going to say, here's 5 people, give them a call, and then figure it out. No, they'll hold your hand through that process. And they'll actually call and make the first contact with the therapist and find one that they think is right also, and then be part of do with.
So thank you, Dan. Thank you, Leslie and Georgia and Stacey. You guys were so great, and I'm just really proud to be a part of this team. So thank you.